Okay, guys, Unit 5 is sensation and perception. So this video is going to be introducing sensation and perception, and then we're going to talk about vision. So sensation is actually the stimulation and interpretation of our senses, how our brain receives that information, what it does with it, how it perceives it, how it interprets it, and then, what we do with it. Our senses adapt to changing conditions and environments, and physical and psychological factors affect our perception of stimuli. Again, the definition of sensation is the stimulation of sensory receptors and the transmission of sensory information to the central nervous system. Stimulation of the senses is automatic, and perception is actually the psychological process that we interpret this sensory information from. An absolute threshold is the weakest amount of a stimulus that can be sensed. So if somebody is like pushing you in the back, they have to push you hard enough for your absolute threshold to sense it. And these differ from humans to animals and also from person to person. Somebody might lightly touch me with their finger, and I might not feel it, whereas somebody else would because their absolute threshold is lower than mine. The difference threshold is the minimum amount of difference that can be detected between two stimuli. And again, people's individual difference thresholds vary. And this is a good chart showing the absolute threshold for each of our 5 senses. Our senses adapt to the world around them, and they adapt to the sensations that we're feeling every single day, especially if a stimulus is repeated over and over. And this is called sensory adaptation. It's the process by which we become more sensitive to weak stimuli and less sensitive to unchanging stimuli. A perfect example would be, well, the ones that are on your screen, but also, let's say somebody sitting next to you has on some cologne or perfume or lotion or something like that. You might smell it as soon as they walk in and sit down. You might smell it for a few minutes as they sit there, but eventually that smell is going to get weaker and weaker and weaker, and it might even get to the point where you can't even notice it anymore. You don't even smell it. This is why people with bad body odor and stuff don't smell themselves, because their senses have adapted to it. The exception to this would be that we don't adapt to pain, however. And you could pause this real quick and do this little lab. It's really easy. You can do it yourself. The signal detection theory is a method of distinguishing sensory stimuli that takes into account not only the strength of the stimuli, but also variables like the setting, your physical state, your mood, and attitudes. It also considers psychological factors like motivations, expectations, and learning. So it's just a way that we test people's sensory stimuli. So let's talk a little bit about vision. When light enters the eye, it relays information to the brain and allows us to see. And again, people with normal color vision can see all colors in the spectrum of visible light, and people who do not have normal color vision are said to be colorblind. But that's not really what they are. They're just missing the rods and cones that would allow them to see certain colors. Light is actually electromagnetic energy that's described in wavelengths. And the electromagnetic spectrum is light that is visible to humans and light that is not. The light that humans can see makes up only a small part of the spectrum, actually. And the main colors are Roy G. Biv, right there. We're going to talk a lot about the different parts of the eye, but the amount of light that enters the eye is determined by the size of the opening and the colored part of the eye. And this is the pupil. And you know what your pupils are. And that is actually, the pupil is actually controlled by the iris, and that's the muscle that controls the dilation of the pupil. The lens adjusts the distance to objects by changing its thickness. The retina is a sensitive surface that consists of neurons, and we're going to talk about that. Neurons that are sensitive to light are actually called photoreceptors. We do have a blind spot in your eye where your optic nerve meets together and travels back into your head to go to your brain. We'll locate it in class. Everybody does have a blind spot, but our eye makes up for it, and because our eyes are constantly moving, so we don't see our blind spot in everyday life, but you can locate it if you're looking for it. And there are two kinds of photoreceptors called rods and cones. Rods are sensitive to brightness and allow us to see black and white. They're very important in peripheral vision as well as like dim lighting situations. And cones provide our color vision. Dark and light adaptation is when our eyes adapt to a darker situation when we need to be able to see. It occurs within a minute or two, and adaptation to bright light happens much more quickly than adaptation to dark. Visual acuity is the sharpness of your vision, and it's determined by the ability to see visual details in normal light. And how we measure this is just your basic eye chart. All of you have had your visual acuity checked at some point. Being nearsighted means a person has to be close to an object to make out its detail, and being farsighted means a person has to be farther away from an object. And this is a really great diagram of the eye. I definitely think that you should take a second and take a look at these, and we're going to do some labeling activities and stuff. But again, the iris is what controls the pupil, and the iris is actually the part of your eye that's colored. That's the colored part of your eye, and it controls the pupil's dilation. The cornea is this covering all over your eye right here, and you can scratch your cornea, and it's very painful. Your lens adjusts its thickness so it can focus. Here's your blind spot right here. This is where your optic nerve is in the back of your eye. You have no photoreceptors right here. And your retina is actually the inside of your eye that contains, and on top of your retina is where all your photoreceptors are. Color vision refers to light, and it doesn't refer to pigments. And the color wheel is made up of colors of the spectrum that are bent into a circle. In humans, some cones are sensitive to blue, some to green, and some to red. And when more than one kind of cone is stimulated, we perceive other colors. Human color vision differs from that of many animals. For example, dogs have two types of cones and see fewer colors, so we often say that dogs are colorblind. Fish are completely colorblind, and birds, their eyes are much better than ours. They see a broad range of colors compared to us. An after image is the visual impression that remains after the original image is removed, and all of you have done this before, probably numerous times, at least once a day. You might not know what it was called, but this is what it is. It's the complementary color of the original image. So if you stare at something, if you stare at an image, like a black image, for 20, 30 seconds, and then you immediately look at something white, you're going to see an after image. And the after image of white is black. Most after images last a few seconds, even up to a minute, and they occur when the cones of the eye become tired after staring intensely at a single color. And we're going to do something real quick. This is a color wheel. All right. This little quick lab. Stare at this flag for about 20-30 seconds, and then look away at something white. So I'd get a white piece of paper on your desk or something like that and see what happens. When somebody is colorblind, we say that they're colorblind because they can't see a certain color. They're not really blind to it. That just means that their eye does not have the cones that perceive that particular color. Many people have partial color blindness. Total color blindness is very rare, especially in humans. Most people who are colorblind do have a red-green color blindness. And color blindness is almost always inherited, and males are more likely to inherit this. This is a test for color blindness, and in the actual test, which would be conducted by a doctor, a person with normal colored vision would see an 8, and I think probably all of y'all see it because nobody's told me that they're colorblind. But a person with red-green color blindness would only see a 3, and a person with total color blindness would see no number. And that's it for today. Thanks.